go to the leadership diamond, I wanted to spend a little time on the notion of power and what's our understanding of power. Because I think what I found was that really speaking, power is very central to leadership. And surprisingly, it's not something that the management literature, for instance, deals with head-on.
Please go.
The best definitions of power that I've ever come across is the one that says power is the differential capacity of individuals or social groups to decide who gets what, who does what. So it's the distribution of resources, it's the distribution of labor and tasks, who decides what, so decision making, and who frames the agenda. And that's a very interesting point that we can unpack later if you're interested. But it's about really who's setting the terms on which all these other three things rest. So it's like who decides what comes to the table for discussion at all. Yeah? Operates in several realms or domains. And this is again something as women is very familiar to us. Obviously it operates in the public realm, the power of the state, of government, of police, the judiciary, etc. The formal systems of power that are visible in public institutions, for instance. It also operates in the private realm, like the family, relationships, friendship circles, marriage. You can see power at work in any school playground, right? There's always the dominant kid who's telling everybody else what to do. There's the bully, there's etc. So that's really in the private realm of interpersonal institutions. But what is very interesting and which only feminist scholars have raised is what they call power in the intimate realm, and that is within ourselves. And for me this is a very interesting and very powerful concept because I think as women particularly, we are not encouraged, most of the time, we are not encouraged to recognize the power we have within ourselves. And so we often grow up very conscious of our duties, our responsibilities, our obligations, but not so much our power. And many of us discover it, or we keep it as a dark secret that actually I'm quite powerful, and our power comes from many different sources. But it's really important to recognize that power operates within ourselves too. So what I tried to do in this diamond is to look at the results of my research, which seem to show that a sort of really effective women's leadership occurs when these four things are in some kind of balance. And so I call them the four P's: power, purpose, principles, and practice. This is the sort of problematic that I was asked to address when I developed this paper. And that was simply this: why is it that we fight so hard for women to get access to power, for women to get access to leadership and authority? So whether in the political sphere, through quotas, etc., we've done that. In the corporate sector, breaking the glass ceiling, challenging the lack of women on boards, women in key leadership positions in corporate organizations. In the social sector, we've done the same. We've created large numbers of organizations founded by women, led by women. I myself have founded and led two large women's organizations. Why is it that it looks as though women are just as bad as men or worse than men when they come into power? So that was the kind of question that I was asked to address when I undertook this task. But basically, yes, there is a problem. that when we get into positions of formal leadership, lots of us, because this also I found in my research, is that what's much more common among women than men is that women play lots of leadership roles informally, where they're not formally vested with any particular position or title or designation, but they play very interesting leadership roles from the sidelines or from informal locations in an organization, just by mentoring each other, mentoring younger colleagues, helping them deal with the challenges of the workplace, etc. And all of that, I think you'll agree, is part of what good leadership should do. But often women are doing it quite unrecognized, quite unauthorized. I mean, they're just doing it because they want to support others. So this I did find. But anyway, coming back to the primary motivation or the primary question that led to this paper was, how can we practice power differently as women? When we gain leadership positions, how can we do it in a different way? And that's really what brought me to the diamond, because I realized that the best way to practice power in a form that's enabling rather than oppressive or controlling is when that power within us is balanced by our purpose, our principles, and our practices. So the idea is to bring these four into harmony and to try and create mechanisms either for ourselves individually and internally, where we take stock of whether these are in harmony, or we create collective mechanisms like what you've created here, where we have a group, where we build a certain level of trust and we try to create collective support systems to help us examine whether these four are in balance. But in this whole practice of power and practice of leadership, the biggest challenge I've realized, and the research has also shown, is in fact the self. Because when we're practicing leadership, we don't suddenly step out of ourselves and become someone else. So we're taking into that role, even if it's at a very minor, very subordinate level, any level of leadership in an organization, we're carrying ourselves with the. And often our practice of leadership is either distorted or facilitated by the self. Usually it's both. Some aspects of the self facilitate. You have certain talents, you have certain individual traits or abilities, like you're really good with people, you have a great sense of humor, you're a fun-loving person, you like other human beings, basically. Your approach to people is positive. So all those kind of traits that you carry within you are extremely facilitated in the leadership role. On the other side, you carry with you also certain negative traits or certain personal history, past experiences, etc., that become barriers and obstacles or that distort the practice of leadership. Many of the studies have shown that the best leaders are not necessarily the most brilliant people, but they are the most secure. And being a secure human being is one of the hardest things in the world. Right? Otherwise, the whole field of psychotherapy wouldn't exist. But because our sense of security, our sense of feeling good about ourselves, our basic self-esteem is built in a period of time when we are living under someone else's control. have control over the circumstances that determine whether you grow up feeling good about yourself or always feeling negative or feeling put down. So if you look at, there's an exercise, I'm going to leave you with several exercises that you can do or not do, it's up to you. But one of the exercises that is quite useful and interesting in this context is that Johari window. Have you ever done that? Which are people are quite fond of it. But if you do it, and if you do it for, say, your boss or somebody who's in a formal leadership role in your organization, I think it's quite revelatory. Especially but what I do is I try to get people to look at what are the processes that shaped your getting there. What you know about yourself, what you don't know about yourself, but others know, etc. Four squares. What I also do is an exercise called my personal history with power, and try to get people to go back and remember the very, very first time that you became aware of the existence of power in relationships. And usually it's some experience in your childhood. So the parts of ourselves that interfere with our leadership styles and create problems for us in leadership roles are parts that are, first of all, very hard to recognize and know. So this is challenge number one, is that I have to figure it out. That it's because somewhere I feel threatened every time somebody challenges me or questions me. There's a interesting quote, it's actually not in the paper, but I'm very fond of using it. This Chinese military strategist called Lao Tse, he said the smartest leader is the person who can keep around him, of course, him. A man who has the courage to question. But I think what he was really saying is, if you're secure enough to have dissent around you, to have people around you who can challenge you, then you're a really strong leader. Because it means that you feel strong enough inside that when someone questions you, you don't feel, oh, they're challenging me, they're trying to put me down, etc. But a lot of these knee-jerk responses that we have to situations that we encounter in leadership are really constructed in a much earlier stage of our lives, and they're at a very unconscious level. That's one. Culturally, I think the challenge I want to put before all of us is that growing up either in the Indian context or in Indian homes abroad or whatever, as a culture, if you think about it, there are lots and lots of practices that were not encouraged at home. One of them is questioning. Some part of our corporate world probably has begun to foster this because these companies are sort of on the cutting edge of a lot of innovation, and they've had to create environments that encourage this kind of thing. Otherwise, the primary activity of the organization would be impaired, right? Because you're supposed to innovate, you're supposed to question the old design and sort of push the envelope, as they